Do you have a second to talk about a rare muscle disease?
Sure.
Okay, cool. So do you know what Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy is?
No, I got no idea.
Okay, so Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy, or otherwise known as DMD, is a fatal genetic muscle disorder that is characterized by progressive muscle damage and degeneration. So primarily, it affects males, and it ultimately leads to complete loss of muscle function. So how many males do you think are affected by this disease worldwide?
I'm guessing it's not a lot, maybe under like 5%.
Okay, so it is very rare. About 1 in every 3,500 males worldwide are affected by DMD.
Okay.
So now, can you guess about what age group of boys is mostly affected by this disease?
I think you said it was degenerative, right?
Yes, it is a degenerative muscle
Okay,
disease.
I'm gonna go with early, so like under 10.
Nice. So yes, primarily young boys, children, are affected by DMD. Symptoms usually occur around the age of 2.5, but boys actually aren't properly diagnosed until about the age of 5.
Okay.
Yeah, so since DMD is a degenerative, very close. So since DMD is a degenerative muscle disease, eventually these patients, they lose all their muscle function and they're completely wheelchair bound. Can you guess around what age these patients are in wheelchairs?
You said something about it going to about 5. I'm gonna say 4 years old.
4 years old. So they actually start around 7. So they can be in the wheelchair about 7. So they're properly diagnosed around the age of 5. But they can be in a wheelchair as early as 7 years old of age. But about 90% of DMD patients are in a wheelchair by the age of 15. So definitely in there.
Okay.
So now, can you guess what causes DMD and this muscle damage?
I'm gonna go with, so I'm an MCD major, so I'm gonna say something like a protein defect, or I don't know, something in genetics or...
So yes, exactly. So it's a genetic disease. It's caused by a recessive mutation on the X chromosome, which is why it primarily affects boys. It's a mutation in the dystrophin gene, so it does lead to non-functional dystrophin protein in the complete absence of dystrophin. So dystrophin is really important in the muscles because it connects the intracellular actin cytoskeleton to the extracellular matrix of a cell in muscles. So this connection stabilizes the sarcolemma membrane of the muscles and protects the muscle from contraction-induced injury. So yeah, so patients with DMD, they don't have dystrophin, so their muscles are completely susceptible to damage, and so their muscles are constantly being damaged and having to regenerate all the time and repair themselves. So
yeah, I did not know anything about it.
Yes. So do you think the lack of dystrophin only affects skeletal muscle?
Probably not.
So it's true. So usually when people address DMD, they mainly focus on the lack of dystrophin in skeletal muscle dysfunction. But dystrophin is actually a really crucial component of the brain. So are you familiar with 2 of the main components that make up the brain?
Not really.
So that's okay. So 2 main things that make up the brain are neurons and synapses. So lack of dystrophin actually leads to a dysfunction in the synapses and disturbs the coordinated and precise activity of all of the neurons within the brain. So in the end, there's reduced synaptic activity and alterations in the location and number of the different neuronal receptors. So do you think that all of these changes due to the lack of dystrophin would alter the physical structure of the brain and the way that it appears and looks?
I would think so, yeah.
Yeah, so there's no clear answer right now. So there's a debate between scientists. Some say that yes, the architecture changes in minor ways, and others claim that no, there's only a few brain or abnormalities such as like neuronal loss and dendritic changes. So it's not 100%, there's a little bit of both. So do you think within the brain, dystrophin is expressed in the same amount, a smaller amount, or a larger amount, as it is to expression in skeletal muscle.
I think probably larger amount, to be honest.
Yeah, well, that's what it seems like, right? But actually, it's only expressed 1/10 the expression that it is in skeletal muscle. So it's much lower in expression. Dystrophin is only expressed in the hippocampus, the cerebellum, the cerebral cortex. So it's actually involved in a lot of places of the brain, but it's much less expression than in skeletal muscle. So are you aware of the function of all these different brain areas?
Kind of, yeah. Yeah, I know we've learned them in a past class, I think.
Yeah. So basically, all these parts of the brain are associated with memory, movement, and speaking. And so, because of the lack of dystrophin in all of these places, many boys with DMD, they often exhibit varying degrees of non-progressing cognitive impairment and lots of different social behavior problems.
Oh wow, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So with regards to the mental and psychological guidance for patients with DMD, what do you think these patients' experiences were before they learned about their diagnosis?
Well, I feel like before they learn about it, they'll probably think that they're just experiencing pain, like muscle pain or cramps that any other kids will go through. I don't think they would think that it's anything severe.
Okay, so you're right. According to most studies, most patients with DMD knew that there was a problem, but they didn't know about the severity of the problem. They just thought, like you said, it was kind of like a muscle cramp or something normal that happens inside of their body. What kind of throws them off is that they're unable to start participating in school activities, right? Because the target audience of Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy is typically found in young boys. 1 in every 3,500 to about 5,000 cases are presented where boys have Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy. And so with regards to that, what do you think their experiences are when they learn about their condition and progression of the disease?
Well, like you said, they're pretty young. I'm assuming that most of the kids are young. So, I mean, it would explain a lot of why they couldn't do the things that other kids would do. I feel like it would be pretty devastating for the kid. I feel like it would be something hard for them to take.
Mm-hmm. So most patients can't really remember the specifics about when they're diagnosed with Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Obviously, there's a lot of information that's involved, as well as a lot of technicalities. And so most patients say that it takes a couple of doctor visits, a couple of tests to be run for them to have a clear grasp and understanding of what the disease is kind of like. They also say that they start to feel anxious or worried because they might have to transition into wheelchairs and respirators, and that could be kind of frightening for most people, I would think. And so what do you think patients with DMD would like to know?
I think as a patient, you would like to know if you could live the same lifestyle as you did before, if there's any way you could slow down the process of it, or anything I could do that won't cause more harm to my body.
Okay, so that's really good. Other things that are a part of that list, I think, would be kind of having a timeline. I mean, some patients, I think, would like to have a timeline with respect to life-changing events that occur. So going on a respirator or going into a wheelchair, those are kind of events that really kind of change the way that you're going to have to handle yourself in life. And so some patients would like to know that. Other patients really like to have that information kept away from them so that they don't have to deal with those stresses immediately. And so how do you think physicians and families should tell children about DMD?
I think because it's mostly kids, they should try to be as positive as they could with this. I don't think it's necessary for them to tell them the end per se, or the conclusion of the disease. I think it's important to tell them that they're not alone in the process. Try to be as hopeful and positive as they can.
Right, and so I think communication in that regard is really important as well. Increasing the amount of communication between the parents and the patient who is diagnosed with DMD is extremely important because this reduces the stress between both party members. And that's mainly because, your parents or the parents are probably burdened because of the kinds of repercussions that they're experiencing and that their kids are experiencing. But at the same time, the kid is probably going through a tremendous amount of physical and mental stress. And so I think that it's also important for the parents to learn about DMD, learn about the symptoms, learn about those kind of things, so that if they do encounter, DMD, then they're able to diagnose quickly or take them to the physician as soon as possible. So in that regards, the kids are experiencing a lot of physical pain, but even more so, I think that there's this huge mental instability because of that. So what kind of psychological and mental support can parents provide for their kids?
I think it's important for the parents to give them someone to talk to outside of family, like a counselor, or just even let them be around kids that around their age, so that they could feel like they're not alone in the process, that there are other people like them to, to help them out.
And so, support groups are really important. Peer groups are really important as well. Getting to people with, who might have the same kind of disabilities, people with Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy, and asking, these kind of questions that can't really be addressed to physicians or family members that they can have confidence in. I also think that therapy sessions with psychologists would ultimately help these individuals because they are under a tremendous amount of mental burden. So yeah, so thank you for your